All right, friends, we are live on Facebook and ready to go.
All right, wonderful. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Anita, aka CBD Genie, and you can find me on Instagram at cbd.genie. Let's get connected. So I'll be the MC for this evening's Texas NORML Cannabis Science open meeting. I'm beyond thrilled to keep the cannabis science conversation going here in Texas. But before we get started, I just wanted to say I hope everyone is hanging in there during these ambiguous times physically, mentally, and emotionally. I want to also give out some shout outs before I get started. So, shout out to Texas NORML for continuing to lead the way with cannabis reform. Shout out to the speakers for your time and all your hard work. And special shout out to all of you for taking time out of life and continuing to stay informed with us this evening. On the agenda this evening, we will have Mike Sandoval, the president of Sante Laboratories, who will be discussing Sante Laboratory services as well as the latest rules and regulations by the Texas Department of State Health Services, acronym DSHS and AKA dishes in the political lingo. Next, we will have Brooke Roselle, and I will be asking her some questions about her cannabis journey. She is a native Texan, cannabis educator, and advocate. And finally, Jax Finkel, Executive Director of Texas NORML, and she will be discussing the Texas primary results. At the end, we'll have time for Q&A, so we encourage you to drop your comments in the Q&A box on Zoom and or comment on Texas NORML Facebook Live. And just FYI, we will also be posting this recording to YouTube after the event. So once again, good evening. My name is Anita, aka CBD Genie, for those who are just now joining us. For the new viewers out there, I'll just do a little quick recap, a bio of myself. I was in the Air Force for 8.5 years. So shout out to all the active duty and veterans out there. Bachelor of Science in Cell and Molecular Biology with a minor in Chemistry y Español from Texas Tech, guns up. Worked in the clinical lab for 13 years, the last 8 of those years to present, literally right now. I've been diagnosing infectious diseases. I'm a patient with a cannabis testimony having ulcerative colitis. And today I'm proud to stand up for Mother Earth as a cannabis science communicator. So I'm excited with this whole cannabis science progress. My cannabis journey is very personal. After being diagnosed with ulcerative colitis and going in and out of the hospital for over 10 years, taking the heavy prescription drugs from the steroids, the opiates, and of course the antibiotics, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. You feel me? Like just done. So my unfortunate medical history motivated my due diligence in learning the science behind cannabis. So where do you go when you want to learn something new? YouTube, right? And I'll never forget the video that was my catalyst in this serendipitous journey. And I highly recommend and encourage you all to visit YouTube and look up The Scientist. Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, and that is spelled Mechoulam. And no, it's not the song by Coldplay, The Scientist, because when you look it up, that's going to pop up. But a quick summary of this video, Dr. Mechoulam is an organic chemist known for the isolation and total synthesis of delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, aka THC, and for the isolation and identification of the endogenous cannabinoids anandamide and 2-arachidonylglycerol, or T2AG. So watching the video and reading about cannabis labs, it still wasn't enough. You know, how many can relate being a visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learner? That's me in a nutshell. I need all of it. So for a few years ago, I had to travel to do walkthroughs of cannabis analytical labs. And I went to California and Colorado, walked through a couple in Arizona, just to name a few, right? Because I wanted to see what was really going on. And you want to know what was really impressive? The high quality standard that these labs had. And testing Mother Earth down to her organic compounds, right? Like the phytocannabinoids, including THC, as it is in nature, right? As well as the other phytocannabinoids, including CBG, CBD, CBN, CBC, CBL, which is just a short list considering there are over 100 different compounds. Because when we talk science and cannabis, we have to realize that we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. We've got a long ways to go. And it's a beautiful plant and it's really exciting. And you can't forget about the terpenoids and their beautiful yields and their properties. Also understanding that depending on what stage the flower is in, is it raw? Has it been heated or decarboxylated? Has it aged? Because all of these variables in the stages will present different compounds as well. And then of course the microbiology department. So personally, after working in the microbiology department for over 7 years, for clinical specimens, I began to notice a lot of similarities in the pathogens. For example, did you know that E. coli is one of the top culprits for UTIs? Staph aureus. How many people do you know, or maybe even you, have had a staph infection, a yeast infection, salmonella, right? Do these pathogens sound familiar? Well, actually, cannabis too can suffer from these opportunistic pathogens as well. So when I've even asked this myself, like, so why are we doing microbiology testing? Like, why is this important? Just to speak on it. Well, one example would be if you made a topical, right? Something that you're going to rub on your skin. If you have contamination, you could potentially cause a cutaneous or skin infection. So and that just goes across the board with any organic product. So it's very important to understand and know what you're using as far as cannabis goes. So again, it was a few years ago that I had to travel and do the walkthroughs of cannabis analytical diagnostic labs. But today in Austin, Texas, I've had the pleasure to walk through my friend Mike's high quality standard cannabis analytical diagnostic laboratory, Sante Laboratories. So with that being said, let's welcome our first speaker this evening. Mike Sandoval is the President and Chief Operating Officer of Sante Laboratories. He's got a double Bachelor of Science in Biology and Toxicology from Oregon State University and a Master of Science in Pharmaceutical Sciences from the University of Texas at Austin School of Pharmacy. He's published more than 10 peer-reviewed scientific papers, book chapters, and patents, and has presented at drug delivery conferences. Previously served as the CEO of XEO Pharmaceuticals, which provided research and development to the new startups in pharma space. Sante Laboratories is the premier ISO IEC 17025-2017 accredited hemp testing laboratories located in Austin, Texas. Sante Laboratories performs a number of traditional and non-traditional testing services, all of which have been validated for your peace of mind. Multiple panels are available for cannabinoids, potency, terpenes, pesticides, residual solvents, heavy metals, and microbiological examinations to meet a variety of state and international requirements. In addition, Sante Labs offer physiochemical shelf life testing, particle sizing, and a hand sanitizer analysis. As mentioned before, Sante Labs is a biohemp contract research organization, CRO. Therefore, they can also support basic to advanced research and product development at all stages. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Mike Sandoval.
Thank you, Anita. You make me feel very special. I really appreciate that. And your level of grace and energy is definitely admirable. So thank you for having me here today.
My
So
pleasure.
I think you touched on a number of good points that I'll try to briefly run through. One overview of Sante Labs, which you did a fantastic job doing so. And then we'll briefly touch on the DSHS or dishes regulations on at least how we interpret them and how Sante Labs could be of value from a partner lab standpoint. It'll be brief, so feel free to reach out to me or anyone else at the company for help. And as always, we're always offering tours and on-site consultations. As always, it's always free. We have plenty to offer here, so I'd love to tell you guys about what we do here. So let me switch. I made a couple slides that I will share. Give me a second. Can everyone see the screen? Great. Okay, title slide. Since I have a string hanging from my back, here's my disclosure. Anything I say today is just my opinion and not necessarily opinion on the company itself, but we will feel free to open the dialogue. So here, really what Sante Labs is, and Anita did a nice job explaining it, is that we are a hemp CRO, or what we refer to as a CDMO, which is a contract development and manufacturing organization. So what that means to us is that we're a one-stop shop where we could take concepts on early stage product development and try to commercialize that from benchtop to not necessarily the clinic in this stage. We could help perform a number of analytical services to get you to that point, but really it's from benchtop to retail shelf. And that involves a number of different activities that we could work together. We look to the sponsor or the customer to really bring the idea of a product that they want to develop or they have, and that they want it to be shepherded through to make sure they're at least regulatory compliant for both state, multi-state level. And that's where we could really focus on working together. So everyone in this room understands the importance of collaboration and open communication. And I think that's what's really, that distinctiveness is really going to, help elevate the industry together. Texas being new to both agricultural hemp as well as now retail, there's a lot of communication that needs to happen. And this is why I specifically love what NORMLs does and what they stand for, and very happy to be here in that perspective. So from, helping companies commercialize from concept to retail involves a number of different activities. And on slide 4, this is really an overarching view of what we do, a snapshot of what we do at Sante. And from analytical testing to research and development, R&D, and manufacturing. And a lot of our services are uncommon, I believe, in the hemp and cannabis space because, we're not just a testing lab. Third-party testing is very black and white, and we're incredibly good at it and provide a number of high-value services. However, where a lot of the interesting sciences happen and where the collaboration partnership really, I think, takes off, in our opinion, is where we get, granular with your product and understanding what you're making, what kind of product you want to provide to your consumers, and what that experience looks like. And we take a very scientific approach to that. From under the analytical testing services, we could support the raw material testing. So if you do have a CGMP operations, which under the Texas guidelines under TAC, you need to have some sort of program to specify what ingredients are moving into the manufacturer. We can help you with that. Through testing is also through regulatory guidance. What we focus on incredibly well is we do a lot of shelf life testing. So to put an expiration date on your product, whether it's a topical, ingestible, or a tincture, you need to have a beyond use date or an expiration date. And in food, they call it the best by date. And to determine that, you have to do that experimentally. And this is where we could really provide support by providing these services to indicate whether you have a shelf-stable product. And if you don't, since we are a 360 lab that have drug delivery and analytical experiences, we can then come up with formulation strategies to help you overcome those limitations. And that's, again, that's where a lot of the fun happens. As we progress on to research and development, the sophistication of the experiments definitely increases. And as we move into manufacturing, this is where we could support with GMP scale up if you want to do long-term shelf life studies, as well as traditional quality control testing. So in short, one-stop shop, and we hope to help you from start to finish. And the team put a beautiful slide together here, really that 360 support that we just discussed. And I really like how we summarize this here is grow, analyze, and innovate. So we can help you grow your business to create a trusted brand, or help you grow from a farmer's perspective. We can analyze your products and help you develop these, transparent claims that both the state as well as, when the FDA does render a lot of these products dietary supplements, that you'll be ready to go. And ultimately, to be competitive in the consumer market, we could help you innovate your products, to be future proof beyond just being regulatory compliant. So briefly, with the DSHS just passing August 2nd, we do have 60 days grace period that everyone has time to get all their paperwork and all the tests in order. And, we could support you with that. And there's a lot of great labs here in Texas that could do the same. We're not the only labs here. But briefly, per the DSHS, they do recommend to work with an ISO IEC accredited laboratory under the 2017 guidelines, which are most of the labs today, I believe, here in Texas. A number of other requirements is that the C of A's, the certificate of analysis, you must document the presence or absence of CBD and THC. In the dietary supplement space, we call that the principal display panel. And whatever you display on the front of your bottle, that is a claim. So determining what that total concentration is, whether it's a per serving or per bottle, that needs to be clearly stated under C of A, as well as your THC. So as Texas, we are a Delta 9 THC state, and per DSHS, your products need to be less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC on a dry weight basis, and we need to disclose our measurement on uncertainty. And this is where I encourage you to all consumers and brand owners to really build that relationship with the lab. It should be a two-way relationship, definitely not one-sided. So understanding what the measurement uncertainty is and it's not the same from lab to lab. At Sante, we have a 0.02%, which is industry standard or leading industry measurement uncertainty in the country. And it varies lab to lab. So I encourage you to understand what that means. Another requirement is that your retail brand needs to be independent from a laboratory or hold less than 10% interest in the accredited lab if it is publicly traded. So we just talked about presence of concentrations of cannabinoids. So when you have that, so the principal front display panel, so if you do state you have a certain amount of cannabinoids or CBD, you could define that on your C of A, and that's going to be provided by the laboratory. Any laboratory here in Texas can help you do that. Determining the presence or absence of Delta 9 THC, which we covered, where really the laboratory could flex what they can do is these other quantitative assays, such as original solvents, heavy metals, pesticides, and then microbiological contaminants, Anita's favorite. So all of these have set analytes here in Texas, but there's really no guidelines stated in law. So this is how we look at the type of test that you need from a heavy metal standpoint. they're looking at the big four: the arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. The acceptable limits in the state of Texas is stated in the third column, pretty reasonable, parts per million. We, on the Sante side, we have our limit of quantification that is well below the acceptable limit here in Texas. So most labs should be able to provide that level of testing. Since we are a pharma lab, we do follow USP 231, 232, 233 for heavy metals, as well as the FDA Q3D. This is a accredited method on our scope of services. On the microbial impurities, there are a number of microbes that are non-traditional to some other states, and they're, for example, as Campylobacter. That was a challenging microbe to implement in hemp flower, as well as ingestibles in all varieties. We were able to work it out, and the acceptable limit in Texas is no detection for all. So the method that we will perform is either using the United States Pharmacopoeia 6162 for non-sterile oral drugs, or we could go the dietary supplement route, which is under the 2021-2022. Again, it's on our ISO 1725 accreditation. For pesticides, and we dodged a bullet for sure, is that there's now 29 pesticides versus the first regulations had 30, and it was glyphosate. That was a very heavy molecule that was very difficult to see analytically. So it was a good call that was removed. But there are 29 pesticides at pretty reasonable acceptable limits compared to other states, including California. So we use a combination of GC triple as well as LC MSMS to quantitate the full panel. This assay is on our scope of accreditation, so we're more than happy to help. But the test that the DSHS has really implemented forward is to protect the consumer. So it's definitely in the best of mind for all Texans. But happy to be here. Let me know if you have any questions. Here's our email. Anita knows how to contact me. But if you need anything at all, please feel free to reach out.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Mike. I greatly appreciate you bringing these services to Texas. It makes my heart smile. And this is fantastic. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. Moving right along. Excuse me. Our next speaker is Brooke Roselle. She was born and raised in San Antonio, Texas, and is currently living in Berkeley, California. Brooke is a cannabis educator and advocate who has been involved in the ever-expanding world of cannabis since 2013. She began her relationship with the plant in Humboldt and Mendocino County, first as a trimmer, to eventually working and learning the multifaceted complexities of the plant, from seed, clone, harvesting, curing, to manufacturing, extraction, and distribution, the works. To her present day and advocacy working in compassionate care, as well as CO2 extractions lab technician. Her cannabis admiration and curiosity has led her to what has become a lifelong expedition to acquire and absorb as much knowledge that is humanly possible. She is a member of the Brownie Mary's Dem Club, Sweet Leaf Bay Area Patient Relation Volunteer, providing compassionate care to the terminally ill, low income individuals. Bay Area Americans for Safe Access, Minorities in Cannabis Business Association, and the BALCA, Bay Area Latino Cannabis Alliance. Her overall goal is to provide accurate, open source, up-to-date knowledge regarding the plant's many functions and how it relates to the body, as well as the blatant truth and history of the plant and how the war on drugs has negatively affected communities around San Antonio and South Texas. She believes wholeheartedly that cannabis should be made available to all in an affordable, compassionate manner, as well as rewriting the legal wrongs that have plagued that have plagued Texas residents since the inception of prohibition. So please welcome my friend Brooke. Yay. Can you unmute yourself, Brooke?
Yeah, I just did. Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate being invited. And Anita, thank you.
Sure.
Let's go. I'm a little nervous. Sorry, guys.
No, it's okay. That's perfectly fine. So when Brooke and I met, we were actually in Vegas, and I was speaking at the Women in Cannabis conference, and we started talking, and I remember her specifically saying that she didn't realize that Texas was moving like we are. And both of us being from Texas and sharing our same passion for cannabis, we stayed in touch, and here we are. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, Brooke?
Okay, so I started my journey in cannabis around 2013 after a life-changing event. I had a friend whose family had been involved in cannabis growth and production for quite a while. And so I ended up being uprooted and taken to Humboldt County. And from there, that was my real introduction to the plant. And it just took me back. It was an outdoor grow. And it just seemed so holistic and became kind of this therapy for me at that time to move past what I was going through. While I was there, I started off as a trimmer, and I got to be very hands-on with the plant, harvesting the plant. And as I was going through that process of learning, I started hearing things about the medicinal qualities of cannabis, which I had no clue. That's not what I was ever raised to know anything about. So that was when I started to try to pursue the knowledge of, well, what do you mean the medicinal qualities? What is this Rick Simpson oil that you talk about? People were making tinctures and salves and things like that, and proclaiming that it had these pain relieving qualities to it. And at that point in time, it was very difficult for me to find information. So that's when, through the process of being on the farm and going through the different levels of interaction that I had with the plant, from seed to clone, learning the life cycles, the vegetation process of flowering and all of that, then I started to find more information as I went along that process. So as I did that, I started to find the resources that held the medicinal knowledge of that. So that's really where I'm at this point in time. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
education.
Because that's where we fall short, right?
Right.
This is the conversations Brooke and I have all the time. Anytime we get on the phone, like an hour will go by, and we are just continuously updating each other on what's going on with the movement in California and what's going on here in Texas. But you know what? I really love where your heart is with Sweet Leaf and the importance of compassionate care with cannabis. And the Senate Bill SB 34 over there in California. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys got going over there, so maybe we can learn from what you're doing?
Okay, so Sweet Leaf Collective is exclusively a donation-based charity organization. Their inception came about in around 1996, shortly after Proposition 215. And basically, they've been providing free medical cannabis to terminally ill individuals in that area since. After 215 came 64, which kind of eliminated a lot of that. So recently, SB 34 was passed, Senate Bill 34, otherwise known as the Dens-Perrone-Brownie-Mary Act, two really incredible individuals as far as in the compassionate care world. And I highly recommend looking into those two figures, and I can provide information for that as well. That kind of reinvigorated the compassion programs by allowing cannabis businesses to donate cannabis tax-free to low-income medical patients. So especially during COVID, we've had to do a lot of our work online instead of meeting face-to-face with the patients by collecting the necessary information that we need, medical information, SSI, different things like that. So that we can do our cannabis delivery donations to them. So that's what I'm doing at this point in time. I believe that if you're going to be in cannabis, you definitely need to learn about the compassionate care aspect of cannabis.
Absolutely,
for sure.
right. Our bodies, right? If we should be able to choose what we want to do for wellness, it's like my body, my choice, right? And That is an amazing, I love where your heart's at with that. That's beautiful, because if terminal is in your diagnosis, you should be able to do anything. but in this
Exactly.
something about cannabis and, you know, nature, using nature should not be anything that you have to fight over or anything like that. So yes, thank you so much for that. Let's talk a little bit about CO2 extraction and how it goes from trim, which is like the shake, right? The flower,
Yeah.
to oil. Can you tell us a little bit about that and your experiences?
Yeah. So with CO2 extraction, basically what you're using, you're taking a trim that is a dry trim, because in CO2 extraction, the CO2 will actually extract water as well. So you want your trim to be as dry as possible. Then from that process, you're putting that trim into a vessel that is going to be with the liquefied CO2, the pure CO2, and you're going to put it under atmosphere, and it's going to kind of create like a gel. That gel will penetrate through that material, and it's going to pull out terpenes and cannabinoids and such. And you're using pressure, you're using heat to create that system. So from there, you're going to have two different types of extractions. The first extraction is going to be your terpene, and that's going to be under a lower temp. After that, you're going to be pulling out your kind of viscous material. And from that viscous material, once you have that, you'll take that and it's going to go through a process of winterization, which you're going to use ethanol. And using temperature and that ethanol, that's going to, oh, I'm sorry, I missed a step. You're going to make a homogenized mixture. It's been a hot second, sorry guys. So you're going to take your ethanol and you're going to take that viscous material and you're going to make a homogenized mixture, and then you're going to pull it under a cold temperature. And that cold temperature is going to create like a separation it's going to separate those two things. So that a certain temperature level will take out the lipids and the plant material and such from the cannabinoids that you actually want. So after you pull that material through, then you're going to do a distillation process and you're going to pull the remaining ethanol out. By that time, you'll have this cannabinoid mixture, and it's depending on where you're going to go from there, it's still going to have its acid chains. So you decide whether or not you're going to use it just as is, or if you're going to decarboxylize it into its next step. And that's a subcritical extraction. There are supercritical, or that's a supercritical extraction. There are subcritical, and there's different types of gases you can use as well. There's different types of extractions. There's mechanical extractions, which is going to be using the micron, like hash extraction. It's a physical extraction. And then what I'm talking about is the chemical extractions as well.
Right. Awesome.
So,
and you know, a lot of people, when they're hearing extractions for their first time, they're like, oh, that's what you just do with cannabis, right? But no, in fact, like if you're growing lavender, any essential oil, right? CO2 extraction has been used, and they've been using this for so long, except it's newer to those, especially in Texas, right? Where we're a little behind, but we're catching up. And yes, so CO2 extraction is for all plant material, in fact, not just cannabis.
Yeah.
And then across the board, we were just talking about education. That's where we fall short. How do you feel about the misinformation and the miseducation of cannabis, and how it affects the state on financial job creation level and all of that? What are your thoughts on that?
There's so much. Well, it's funny because cannabis and hemp was a part of the state. It was part of the US up until prohibition. I mean, we used it for feed. It was the third most common used ingredient in medicine up until a point. And after prohibition came into power, it really, it subjected us to, like, I mean, there could be so many jobs as a result of the legalization of hemp or cannabis. It's just never ending. But as far as like, as far as the propaganda, there's so much misinformation. Every time I go home, there's so much misinformation on cannabis. And that's really where we need to start. When we're creating policy and laws in Texas specifically, one of the first things that we should do is to educate the populace. It's so versatile for so many things, from medicine to industry to agriculture. it's of course not a cure-all, but it has so many documented medicinal properties that it's a very versatile plant.
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah.
1,000 plus modern uses, right? I mean, we're
Oh
talking
yeah.
fuel, fiber, clothing, medicine, anything. And I always say this, I find myself always saying this, but whatever your profession is, whatever your job is in this life, whatever your skill set is, it can be brought and transferred to the cannabis space because it's just another business that's going to continue to grow. And every single step in business is needed in the space as well. So most people think, oh, well, I don't know anything about this, that, or the other, but well, actually your job, no matter what it is, can be brought to this space in regards to business.
Exactly.
Also, let's talk about the seeds. So this is why I like talking.
Oh
with,
yeah.
you're in California, you know, you're a Texas
Yeah.
native, but and you want to be a part of it when moving forward with Texas as well, just being in the conversation. So the Texas Department of Agriculture has a seed list, and I just want to hear your thoughts about this. I mean, because this is all new, right? We're all, everything's just barely happening. We're making the moves that we should be. It's just maybe a little dragging heel style a little bit, but yeah, what do you think about that seed list that we've got going on? Just your opinion.
I was actually kind of shocked that there was a list to start with. One of the coolest things about cannabis is that we have so many varieties. And why do we have so many varieties? Because we have the ability to take that seed and pull plants together to create new varieties. And then you get new terpene contents and you get this and that and whatever else. And it's very interesting to me that they're wanting to close the door and limit the possibilities by only allowing a certain seed count. That's something that I honestly didn't think would even be like on the table. So I think that should be maybe a reconsideration, just because the genetic varieties, the possibilities, just by, you know, being able to create and manipulate and use the seeds for what they're intended, as opposed to like really like cornering in people on, well, you can use this and you can use this and you can use this, but there's all this other variety. I mean, it's an interesting conversation, but then again, that's why I think that education plays such an important role in what we're doing, because I think that because of that lack, we don't have the ability to, or we don't have that information accessible to us about how cannabis is developed and about those varieties that could occur. You know, there might be some really awesome medicine that could be obtained by some crazy plant variety that you're able to pull on because you're using different types of seeds, and there's this fertilization process, blah, 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 blah. And so you're able to get this really cool variety. And that's so limiting to have like this list. I'm not really sure why that's happening.
Right. Well, mainly because they're trying to regulate the compounds, right? And which is it's difficult in regulating nature, but that's what it comes down to. But you're right. I mean, that's the beauty. We have evolved just like cannabis has. We've evolved together, and it kind of limits the hybridization moving forward, and only limiting us to be able to grow these particular strains. So that's true. Good point. What I wanted to ask you though is, me being in Texas, I can personally relate with my own family members who maybe not have been on board with what I'm doing in Texas. And obviously I've got some still active duty military friends who, because of their careers, aren't able to back me up a lot of times. How has it been with you as far as roadblocks in your journey?
I mean, I definitely had quite a few in the beginning, and it just, and I still do. I still continue to have roadblocks. That misinformation, especially in San Antonio and you know, Texas being subjected to the war on drugs, being the locale of where we are, it's not seen for the medicine that it is, even though it definitely started out in the United States as a medicine, right? It was a main ingredient.
It was in the pharmacopoeia.
Yeah, it was in the pharmacopoeia, exactly. So it's having to go back and present that information, present that history that's kind of been, you know, washed away or like kind of pushed into the corner, and reminding like my family that what the journey of why I'm doing this, because we've had family members who have passed on from cancer and various other ailments. And the research is out there of the pain alleviation that this plant could provide that isn't accessible to us right now because of the regulations. And, so I have to bring the information as factual as possible, the history as factual as possible, and present that to my family and to my friends who don't have that access. I have to bring them that information, and I'm happy to do it. And that's how I go about the conversation, because it is something that I believe in. San Antonio is a huge hub of military who could greatly benefit from this. I have a lot of military family members that have been in a number of different situations that could definitely benefit from this, but really we need to get the misinformation to subside. We need to have the state on board so that we can give people the medicine that they need. So
Absolutely.
That's where I'm at with that.
Even with the veteran community between
Yeah.
California and Texas, those are the two largest populations with the veteran community. Those are the two top states in the country. So it's one of those things where we need to be able to help our veterans, help everyone really, to be educated and informed on the facts. And that's why I'm so excited that you and I got to know each other, and we're continuing to move forward. It's wild that we met in a completely different state, and we're, continuing to just work hard and go through these trials and tribulations, because it's true. I have hit so many roadblocks. I have been told no so many times. I have, and that's how it be. But in order to make change, it's not going to be a smooth sailing. You got to go against the grain and be the trailblazer, but lead with science and lead with facts and the education. So is there anything else you wanted to add or throw out there?
I just want to touch upon, you are going to come upon roadblocks in this cannabis journey, if so you choose. Really just keep going. Like, I had such a difficult time locating information. Well, now there's certifications and there's education everywhere. There's a 4-year program in Michigan. Don't stop. Just keep going. People are going to try to tell you whatever, but just like anything that you're passionate about, just keep going. Find the people that have the information, find the people that want to open those doors for you, and just keep continuing on, because information.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end that there. It's been an amazing serendipitous journey, just working with people like yourself and staying connected with people like yourself. Thank you so much for your courage and doing what you're doing, and just doing the journey and learning everything you're learning in Cali, because next time you come back to Texas, we want to hear all about it.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Brooke, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guys.
Awesome.
Good night.
Yeah. All right, so our final speaker, we're going to have Jax Finkel, is the Executive Director for Texas NORML, the Austin chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, having also served as a volunteer coordinator, political legislative director, and deputy director. She has been involved in cannabis law reform since 2005 and has been an official board member since 2006. In her tenure, Jax has given hundreds of interviews and participated in many panel discussions and speaking engagements. She's innovated the first ever cannabis-centric voters guide in 2012 and continues to prepare the Texas NORML Voters Guide for each election season. She helped spearhead the first Texas chapter training. She believes in freely sharing information and facilitating organizational growth. She created the curriculum and helped organize and execute several dozen regional advocacy trainings between 2015 and present. She works closely with Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy and the coalition partners, along with many other cannabis groups. Jax is often at the Capitol pushing her cannabis law reform and building relationships with our legislators. Cannabis law reform is her passion. Please welcome Jax Finkel.
Hello. Hi, and thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Anita. I appreciate it very much. I am going to just kind of jump right into it. So, primaries, right? Elections have been crazy. Everything from the pandemic has been kind of changing our expectations and dates, and we're having to go with the flow a little more. So, the primary runoffs. So let me take a step back. In Texas, we have the primaries between the two major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, in March. If they don't make a 50% plus one in the elections between the Democrats and the Republicans, then they go into a runoff. And ultimately, whoever wins the runoff is going to be on the ticket for that party during the general election. Just as a side note, the Libertarians elect their candidates through a convention process. I don't think that there were Greens this year or independents, but I do know that there will be some Libertarian candidates. So what I want to get straight into is talking about these results, because some of them are pretty interesting. So when last we spoke, we had put out the voter guide having to do with these runoffs. So let's talk about these results, shall we? I'm going to start at the federal level. So starting at first at US Senator, let me make sure I have proper info in front of me. There we go. Okay, so MJ Hagar was facing off with Royce West, for the Democratic runoff for US Senator. And the winner is going to be facing incumbent John Cornyn. And it ultimately went to MJ Hagar. She won in the primary runoff. MJ is a veteran. She has vocally supported medical cannabis in her campaign. And just to let everybody know where John Cornyn stands, he has stood in the way of change and voted against some things up in DC. And I wanted to share with you some things that he replies to his constituents. So constituents who participate in our action alerts or who are engaging with emailing their legislators, these great, civic citizens, they sometimes will forward me, the response from their legislator so that we know, what their concerns might be or what their talking points are. So John Cornyn often replies, because it's a standard letter that he likes to send, that he needs more research and that regular use of marijuana has been associated with psychiatric and neurodegenerative disorders, as well as a risk of developing dependence, end quote. That's pretty much not right. There are people that do have problems with cannabis, and we can all acknowledge that, but it's actually incurable neurodegenerative disorders is a condition, an overarching condition that is included in the Texas Compassionate Use Program. So there's that. So then I'm going to go to Congressional District 17. So this would be your congressperson that will go serve up in DC. So a little bit of background here. You may know the name Pete Sessions. Pete Sessions is a longtime prohibitionist who single-handedly stopped a lot of bills over the years. And he had been a congressperson in the Dallas area. Well, he lost his election to, I believe it was Colin Allred. And so now he is back, and it was in the primary runoff for the Republican seat, and he ended up winning it. So Pete Sessions is going to be facing off with Rick Kennedy of the Democratic Party, and potentially a libertarian or an independent as well. We'll see how that goes. This is a historically conservative district. So it is likely that Sessions could win. I'm sorry. So we really need to get the voters educated out there about what's going on. And, things can change in time, so we shouldn't give up. We should continue trying. Now I'm going to go to some state level races. So talking about Senate districts, we have, hold on real quick. Roland Gutierrez in Senate District 19, he ended up winning the Democratic runoff. And if you've been following the news, you may have seen that Gutierrez has proposed a plan for medical retail adult use of cannabis. So that is an exciting thing. He will be facing Pete Flores. and he's the incumbent. And just so you know, Pete Flores was a co-sponsor of the low THC medical cannabis bill, and he did vote for the, was also a co-sponsor of the industrial hemp bill. So these are two people who have taken some different positions there. So I guess go with whoever you feel most mirrors what you would like to see. Another one of note is SD 27. So Eddie Lucio Jr., so the father of Lucio III, who was a big medical champion in the House, he was in a runoff for Democratic District 27, which is down in the Rio Grande Valley. And he ended up winning his runoff, and he'll be facing Republican challenger Vanessa Tijerino. So Lucio Jr. was a co-sponsor for the medical program, and he voted yes for industrial hemp. We don't know Tijerino's positions yet. We're going to be sending out a new voter guide questionnaire for the general election that's coming up in November. So we'll have a new edition out for you guys sometime soon, and hopefully we'll be able to include these people's responses as well. Another one of note is in House District 2. So a gentleman named Dan Flynn was the Republican incumbent. However, he lost this runoff. And the reason that this is of note is that Flynn consistently voted no on medical cannabis and decriminalization. And we don't know the person who won, who is Brian Slayton. We don't know their position yet. So once again, we hope that they'll participate in the voter guide. And they will be facing off with Democratic challenger Bill Brandon. Talking about House District 45, this is in the Dripping Springs area. And if you've been following things over the years, you probably recall Representative Jason Isaac. He was a huge champion working with Lucio III back in 2015, getting between 70 and 80 co-sponsors. Well, his wife won the Republican primary runoff, and her name is Carrie Isaac. Now, after Jason Isaac, because they have the same last name, so let me be specific. So after Jason Isaac finished his term and didn't run for re-election, actually a Democratic, Aaron Zwiner, took the seat. So Aaron Zwiner is the incumbent and will be facing off against Carrie Isaac. Zwiner was a co-author for medical cannabis, penalty reduction, and hemp during her freshman year. So, 45 has switched between the Democratic and Republican leadership. It could potentially switch again or stay the same, who knows, but both candidates have a good shot at the seat, and both of them have varying degrees of good policies on cannabis. So there's an update for you. Then talking about HD 47, which is an Austin area House district as well. There was a runoff on the Republican side, and Justin Berry won. He's an active police officer and was appointed vice president for his police union. He'll be facing off with Democratic incumbent Vicki Goodwin. Vicki co-authored medical cannabis. She's participated in our candidate forum. She also was for penalty reduction and voted yes for the hemp bill. So that'll be another race to tune into. I think typically it tends to be a more Democratic voting area, but as we know, things can change. One thing that I wanted to point out, which was someone that we lost during a primary, was JD Sheffield in HD 59. He lost his runoff to Shelby Slauson. And the reason that this is of note is that Sheffield was a joint author for a comprehensive medical program. He voted yes on decrim and on the bills. He was a doctor, so someone who was important to have on the side of cannabis. And Shelby Slauson is, I believe, running unopposed. So definitely we need to engage in District 59 and make sure that we update her on where we're at in the policy and make sure she's educated on cannabis so that we can really be prepared for this upcoming session. And then I have two more I want to talk about. One that I just found personally interesting is HD 142. It's down in the Houston area. Harold Dutton is the Democratic incumbent. He's served for many, many years. It was a very close race in the runoff, but he did end up maintaining being the Democratic candidate. And this is of interest because Harold Dutton was the first person to author a bill that would change the criminal penalties for cannabis in Texas back in the late 90s, early aughts. So he will maintain his position on the ballot, and he will be facing off with Republican Jason Rowe. Now, those were the runoffs, but in addition to the runoffs, there was a special election. So what happened was in Texas Senate District 14, Senator Kirk Watson is going to be stepping down from his position because he is moving into a new job title with I forget which university. So we needed to have someone to, fill out the rest of the term because the term goes until 2022. So there were 6 candidates, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, a Libertarian, and an independent who ran. And ultimately, it looked like it might go off to another runoff election for this special election because it was between Travis County Judge Sarah Eckhart and former Representative Eddie Gonzalez. And it ended up being that Eddie conceded. So it seems now that Sarah Eckhart is going to be the senator for Senate District 14 and will be filling out the remainder of the term. So that is all that I have regarding political update. So I we had a couple questions in the Q&A and on Facebook. And so if Brooke and Mike and Anita wanted to turn their video back on and unmute themselves, we can maybe tackle some of these questions here. So I see there was a question about the Michigan program. It looks like there's a link there, and also the Maryland program. So I actually want to take an opportunity really quickly to mention something that is coming up. We have been reached out to, actually, a student who is looking to get the MS with the University of Maryland for their, I have to remember exactly what it is. Cannabis technology and medical specialists. I might need to go look this up. But what she's doing is she's going to be doing a patient and a veteran study of Texas patients and veterans. And we're going to be sharing that whenever it comes out so that we can help gather as much data as possible, because her goal is to have her study ready in time for when bills are being drafted and filed for pre-filing in November. And so I just want to put that on everybody's radar that if you are a patient, please stay tuned. It is an anonymous survey, so it will be totally anonymous. But what it is for is to give us a grasp of true patient needs and to be able to take this real data back to the legislators and be able to talk about that with them. So since you brought up University of Maryland, I just wanted to say that real quick. But I do have a question from Facebook for Mike. So there was a couple questions about what kind of testing in addition to cannabis testing do you do? Do you do anything outside of cannabis testing, or is that your sole focus?
Great question. It's definitely not our sole focus. We've been researching cannabinoids and looking at how it interacts with container packaging systems as well as different diluents. So I feel like we have a very good understanding of cannabinoids as a whole, but we're deep rooted in the pharma space. So we've continued to help pharmaceutical companies with their drug development, analytical method development, and pharmacies. So we could do vitamin testing, as Anita said at the beginning. We could do hand sanitizer testing. We run the traditional United States Pharmacopoeia assays for purity testing. So it's incredibly popular right now, and the market needs it. But really, we're a one-stop shop from start to finish, whether it's dietary supplements, cosmetics, cannabis or hemp, and nutraceuticals.
Yeah, we have to specify, right? The legal form of cannabis, hemp. Yeah. Right. And then there was one further question for you, Mike, about testing. Just wondering, did you also do like genetic testing, like the genomic testing of what is inside of the plant? Do you do that for like farmers?
We have not gone into genetics at this time. I mean, it's the closest we get to genetics is doing like PCR for mycotoxin or for aspergillus and some other microbes. Okay. And we've explored looking into it, but it's not something that we're going to offer immediately. We'd rather partner with someone that does that incredibly well, and that's their specialty. and we just, share resources in that regard.
Okay. And actually, so you have quite a few questions. People are very interested in what you're doing. So just one more, and then I have one for Brooke as well. So Dave was asking, are most of your clients from out of state or from here in Texas?
Both. We see a very nice split. I mean, we are a Texas company, so we have a lot of great relationships that we've we've earned over the last several years. But we do service a lot of out of state clients as well as international clients. I mean,
and you might pick up more Texas clients because the licensing is rolling out now, and people are going to have those compliant COAs for their products. So that'll be interesting to see if that affects the ratio.
Yes, we would love to service Texas only if we could. So
you're like, yes, be a big market. Let's do it. Awesome. So Brooke, I have a question about extraction. So you talked about there's kind of some different types of extraction. You specifically talked about CO2, but they were wondering, what is your favorite type of extraction? Like the one that you think is just the best?
Oh man, it's got to be, just a real basic extraction. I started when I was working on the farms exclusively, just doing an alcohol extraction. That was fun, just something really simple, and anyone can do it. I like something that's accessible for all. So making a salve, making a tincture, that kind of thing. Even though the CO2 extractions are a lot of fun, I have done some butane extractions as well. Just a basic alcohol extraction, why not?
Yeah.
It's honest, guys.
Keeping it real. And then, so on Facebook, Anita, I had some people asking about the veteran conference that's coming up. So there's going to be a Texas Veteran Cannabis Conference. It's going to be totally online. It's on October 17th. And Anita's going to be on it. And they were asking, what is it that you're going to be talking about on the panel that you're on?
Well, like I had mentioned earlier, how between the country, California and Texas, and the country being the highest populated veteran community, it's about bringing us all together. Because if we're all together as a unit, like the military actually works, then that's when we can really make change. And when we're all together as an educated unit, then we really can move some mountains. So it's really about just continuing to get the veteran community informed. And also, I like to, share my career, because I was once there that I didn't want to talk about cannabis because I was fearful, right? I was scared to say anything. But after the education and the knowledge kept coming, there was just like, I can't deny these facts. I can't deny the truth. So it's the same thing outside the medical community with the veteran community, because when you are in the military for X amount of years, for so long, it's difficult to come out of that routine. But when you see other veterans who are actively, making the moves and educating, then it's easier to get back into that unity, right? And make those changes and make those moves. So I'm really looking forward to it. I'm excited about it. I don't want to cut everyone short right now, but I'm actually testing COVID. I'm in the lab right now. So in fact, I kind of got to sneak out of here right now. Was there any other questions?
So that was the only question for you. And
Yes.
thank you for the work that you're doing, both for Texas veterans and in the lab testing for COVID patients.
Yes. And so everyone just stay safe out there. That's all I have to say. But I just wanted to say thank you to all the speakers for coming through this evening. You all did an amazing job. And this is exactly how we make change, is continuing to keep the cannabis conversation going. So thank you all for your time. I'm going to sneak on out of here, Jax, if you can help me out here at the end.
I got it.
All right, everyone, have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Be safe in the lab, hun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So there are just two more questions I want to get to real quick with you guys. So I was actually interested by this as well, Mike. You do best by date experiments. So in 30 to 60 seconds, can you summarize how do you do that? Because they were wondering, how do you make those experiments happen so that then you can come up with that date?
Mhm. Great question. It's a time experiment. So we could look at both spoilage, some shelf life from a microbiology standpoint, as well as chemically. And chemically, people want to know how stable is CBD over some, defined time. So let's just say, to get into Whole Foods, you need 12 months shelf life. So to prove out 12 months, you could run a real-time study from as soon as you make a lot to you pull a sample at the end of the year, and then you test to see what the CBD concentration is at the end and how does that compare with the beginning. So that we could also perform accelerated shelf life studies. And this is all defined under the ICH limits from a conditions and also how to predict shelf life. And you could get an answer a lot faster than waiting 12 months.
That's
It's always
nice.
recommended to, have real-time shelf life studies, in parallel, because there's no better data than the real data, but there are ways to predict and accelerate to get that answer fast, because no
And
one
you
has.
can kind of run them alongside each other, and then you have
Exactly.
your date, and then in a year you're like, do we need to reassess that?
Yes, and it's going to be as the FDA starts to, shift their focus that cannabinoid-based products are dietary supplements, then that's where shelf life studies are going to be critical.
Yeah.
Because it's a very black and white regulation in the supplement space.
Yeah. Well, one last question for you, Brooke. So we have some patients talking about uptake methods. There's a lot of different type of uptake methods. What is the one that you have found to be the most effective whenever you've been, anecdotally talking with the people that you come into contact with?
Let's see. Depending, it really on what they're working with, to be perfectly honest. If people are having sleep issues, like taking an edible so that they can, right before bed, so that they can just go ahead and go to sleep and then not really feel the effect of the medication, even though they need a stronger dose. So it really just depends on what you're working with. A lot of our patients like to smoke flower. It's just as simple as that. So, but, it depends on what their delivery system, vaporizers and such, so they can get a little bit higher of a bioavailability. But it really just depends on what you're working on. If there's anything in specific, if they can shoot me a direct question or more information, I can give them.
I will definitely pass that along if they have a more defined one that they want to follow up with. Because I know sometimes, there's inhalers, vaporizers.
Yeah.
If you have rheumatoid arthritis, maybe use a salve. So it can be very subjective.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, I am so appreciative of your time. This was really interesting. So we've had a lot of people watching on the Zoom and on Facebook. We'll have this up on YouTube later so that people can continue to learn from all of the great info that you've shared with us. And I'll make sure to connect to the Sante Labs site and any site that you want me to share with what you're doing, Brooke. I'd be more than happy to. So we'll drop all that in the comments. And on that note, thanks, guys, for everything.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
It's like a virtual hangout session. So thank you.
That's right.
Our monthly socializing. All right, guys. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.